Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So today I want to go over a few quick things, um, some comments on some videos that I saw. So first, I did do an interview a couple weeks ago that I'm really excited to share with everybody, but it's taking me a bit longer to get out because it was a video interview, the first video interview I've done, and I'm using some new software, editing it, so there's a bit of a learning curve with it, but I'm using the free version of DaVinci Resolve. So if there's anybody that is familiar with that, you can drop me a line at the email address, california.dreamin.podcasts@gmail. I decided to use it because it's a pretty professional software and it has a free version. So I'm always out for looking for things that are free. What I wanted to start with was a video I saw a couple days ago that touched upon something that I had thought about earlier, but really got into it a little bit more. So this is a video from Bo of the Fifth Column. He's kind of a progressive YouTube commentator. So I just want to play just a couple quick clips from that, and then I have some comments about it. So this video is entitled, Let's Talk About Leaving Your State. And so what he talks about in this whole video, I'm not going to play all of it, just a little bit, is he talks about that he's received a lot of messages from people who are considering relocating to different states due to what's happening in America. So let's listen to just a moment of this.
Gotten a whole bunch of messages from people thinking about leaving a state because of recent legislation, or leaving a state because of a recent ruling, or leaving the U.S. and going back to the country that they came from because they feel like they're taking advantage of the situation here. I don't have answers to this. These decisions are decisions you're going to have to make.
So what he's talking about is that the situation is getting so dire in the United States that a lot of people don't feel safe. They feel it for their own personal safety and self-protection, self-preservation, that they need to think about packing up and leaving and going to somewhere that they feel more safe. Yeah, so that's what he's talking about here.
You're going to have to sit down and evaluate it honestly. And there's things you need to consider. You know, if you're worried about your safety, yeah, that's an easy one. If you have the ability, yeah, get out. When it comes to something like that, where there's doubt, there is no doubt.
This is something that I had thought about before, as especially these abortion and LGBTQ and kind of culture war issues come up in these different states. There are a number of marginalized groups who are really feeling legitimately so unsafe. And, you know, something that crossed my mind is maybe California could start a refugee program. We actually pay people, hey, you really don't feel safe? You feel your physical safety is threatened, or you feel that you just are worried about what's going on and you honestly feel threatened, we will pay for you to relocate. We'll set you up with your travel costs. I mean, we're already considering, you know, paying people to travel to California for abortion. So why don't we just pay people to relocate over here, and maybe 3 months living expenses, get them set up with job assistance programs, or, you know, just a lot of different programs to help them get settled. And have a fund that would fund that. So anyway, that's just an idea that I had, just throwing it out there. So let me play another little clip from this.
States that enacted this kind of legislation, they're going to have an economic downturn. They're going to have issues. Think about all of the people who are considering packing up and leaving the state that they live in. Now imagine the people coming the other way. It's a whole lot easier to decide, oh, no, no, Texas is now out. We are definitely not moving there, than it is to actually pick up and move from Texas. Businesses understand this. They're not going to want to move to places they're going to have trouble recruiting.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is the economic impacts of this. And this is something I thought about, I don't know, I started thinking about it maybe a week or two ago. So, I went to college, I went to graduate school, and when I did my graduate school search, it's a national search, and a lot of people do this for college as well. So you research all the different colleges or schools in the country, and you make a list and you research them and think, what is it? What do I like about this one? What do I not like about this one? What are the advantages here? And there's all sorts of different things you can take into account, like the notoriety of the program, the location, how much you'll like that, if there's specific people in the department that you might want to work with, just all sorts of different issues that can come into play. But the point is, it's a national search, a national consideration. And so what he's saying here is that when it comes to these decisions like choice of college, graduating high school, seniors thinking about where they're going to go to college, choice of graduate school, where am I going to move to study, graduate school or professional school or law school or medical school. Job searches. A lot of people do national job searches. Where do I want to settle? Where do I want to work? Where do I want to start a career? And personal, where do I want to settle down? Maybe try and, get married and have a family and stuff. And people have options about where they're going to go. So what he's saying is that a lot of young people, because young Americans do tend to be more progressive, they're just writing off half the country. They're going to look at states like Texas and Florida and whole parts of the South and the Midwest and just say, why would I go to one of these states that has banned abortion or severely restricted reproductive rights? Why would I go to a state that has these ridiculous culture war issues, that has weak social safety nets, that has a bad education system, that doesn't teach history? Why would I want to have a career there? Why would I want to settle down there? Why would I want to raise my kids there? So they're just writing off half the country. And so what he's saying is this is going to have economic effects in 5-10 years. Basically, they're going to have a brain drain, right? So nobody's going to want to go to work there. Industries and companies are going to withdraw from these states. And what this is going to start is it's going to accelerate this big sort. So this big sort idea is the idea that people are sorting based on ideology into different counties and states. And this has been happening for 30, 40 years. There's actually a book that was written called The Big Sort. And this is just going to put this in overdrive. So the red states are going to become older, whiter, more conservative, more radical. And the blue states are going to become younger, more progressive, more diverse, better educated, more productive. And this is going to intensify a kind of vicious cycle of antagonism from each respective side. So the red states, for instance, are going to suffer economically. Their governments are going to be even less able to provide for them, and they're going to become more isolated culturally, and they're going to have this anomie, and the extremism is just going to feed on itself. And then the blue states are going to look at the red states, and they're going to see their dwindling power in the federal system, and they're going to become much more resentful and angry towards the red states, who are going to start receiving more and more net federal funding, which they already do now, while contributing even less to national GDP. So they're going to say, look, we're the productive parts of the economy. We drive everything that happens in America's economy, but we don't have much say in what's going on. And all of the policies and legislation and judicial stuff is from these red states that basically take all the money and don't contribute much. A lot of people from the blue states are going to feel resentful about that. So you're going to have this vicious cycle that's going to come from this. And really, as the federal government becomes more and more dysfunctional and unable to achieve anything, I think the United States is going to start to resemble more like the European Union, which is just this loose, disconnected patchwork of independent countries that's held together only by, like a common currency and, the threat of federal troops for states who try to nullify or ignore federal law. I mean, that's it. But what else is there to hold everything together? So, yeah, and and then we're going to have this continuing constitutional problem about by 2036 or 2040, somewhere around that time, 30% of Americans will control about 2/3 of the seats in the Senate. And actually, I looked into this. This is not something that's entirely new. If you go back, that actually has been almost true for a while. The difference is that in the past, it was pretty balanced between left and right, or Democrat, Republican, whatever the two dueling parties were. So throughout much of the 20th century, 30 to 40% of the country theoretically controlled the majority of the Senate, or supermajority. But it wasn't a problem because, say, the Democrats won an election, they would win a balance of small states and big states. So they would win a number of big states, kind of give them a popular edge, but then they would also win a bunch of small states, so they would kind of maintain control. So whoever won, whether it was Democrats or Republicans or whatever the two parties were, it didn't really make a big deal because there was balance. And what we're seeing now is there's more of a partisan divide, so that when, for instance, the Democratic Party wins an election, they win a lot of these big states. And so they rack up votes in these big states, but they're not represented in the Senate because each state only gets 2 senators. And when red states win, when Republicans win, they amass all of these small states. So there's a divide that the big states, by and large, are going more blue, more towards the Democrats, and all these rural small states are going towards the Republican. And this partisan divide is going to be accelerated by these laws that are being passed and these Supreme Court decisions, because that's going to further drive people apart into these two different nations. And so it'll only exacerbate the constitutional issues that are going on. So that's what he's talking about right here. I mean, I'm extrapolating from what he's talking about, but that's what he's saying. So another video I wanted to show you real quick. This was a couple weeks ago. Gavin Newsom had a press conference right after the Roe v. Wade overturning. And I wanted to play just a couple excerpts from that and comment on it because he said some interesting things.
Western governors have stood up as well, and I'm grateful to Governor Brown, Governor Inslee, that are asserting that the United States of America at least has the Western United States that will stand tall in terms of our reproductive values and reproductive freedoms.
Okay, so he is going to talk here about how the Western United States is going to stand up for reproductive values and freedoms, and he compares it to Texas. So let's listen to a little of this.
And we are a sanctuary. And we laid out the principles of what that means. One of them I'll be codifying with legislation that I'll be signing here today. We're also here to protect those that will be under assault. We don't think this, we know this. This is not assertion. Again, this is not hyperbole. This is fact. Look at SB 8. SB 8 in Texas, one of the largest states in America. The folks in Texas right now can be civilly fined through a private right of action for aiding and abetting someone that may come to the state of California, as an example, to seek their reproductive rights and reproductive freedoms. We will in no way, shape, or form support, enable, investigate, resource any of those activities or energies. That's part of the piece of legislation I'll sign today, but it's also part of our legislative package that will be moving forward, providing true sanctuary and providing legal protections for those governors and those legislative leaders in these red states that literally will deny women the ability to get support or even access to the resources to travel to states like California. You can't make that up.
Okay, so he's talking about comity here. So COMITY. So this is the idea that In the federal system, states respect other states' laws. So if New York passes a certain state law, then California and Texas and Florida and whatever pay deference to that law, to that state law, as much as long as it doesn't violate federal law. And what he's saying is, now we're not going to do that. We're just going to ignore your law. In fact, we're not only going to ignore it, we're going to pass our own laws that are in conflict with it. So this is a direct violation of this principle of comity between the states. And so this is an escalation. And that's what he's talking about here. This is a big deal.
But those are facts. Read SB 8. What is SB 8? I saw some companies want to help with travel expenses to send folks to places like California, but under SB 8, they're subject to civil fines. You see what Marco Rubio's doing in Florida? He's got a law to strip all your tax breaks if you're a company and you're providing reproductive care to your employees. That's the country you're living in right now. We are living in.
Notice his choice of words there. That's the country you're living in. Again, so he didn't say that's your country, that's our country. That's the country, like it's another country that's outside of us that we happen to be living in. So it's a very interesting choice of words.
But it's not a reality here in California. The rights revolution, what we've come to accept and expect over the last 60 years, 50, 60 years, is being rolled back in real time. Wake up.
Wow. So sounds like he could do my podcast for me. I mean, this is what I've been talking about for a while, that the goal of the conservative movement, the goal of these red states and these Federalist Society judges over the past few decades, they literally want to roll back the 20th century. They want to roll back the Great Society. They want to roll back the Civil Rights Movement. They want to roll back the New Deal. They want to go back 100, 150 years into the past. And that's what he's saying here. So he's making a point that we've been making for a long time. If you stay in the U.S. is going in the opposite direction that we want to go.
Across the spectrum. They haven't been shy, they haven't been timid, and they're just winding up. I mean, Justice Thomas, his own words, saying, let's go. It's Griswold next. It's not just Hodges and same-sex marriage, it's Lawrence. The irony of that shouldn't be lost on anyone in terms of his own status with a relationship and the love of his life. Lawrence v. Texas, be reminded, in 1967, a guy named Richard Loving married Mildred Reeder. And for that, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison or was kicked out of the state of Virginia. And God said in that race famously, or rather in sentencing him, God put different races. The judge said this to Mr. Loving. God put different races on different continents for a reason. God never wanted the races to mix. That was my lifetime. That was interracial marriage, which, according to Justice Thomas, should be considered.
Now, he's kind of stretching a little bit here. I read the dissent that Thomas wrote, and he does not specifically mention this interracial marriage case. But the spirit of what he's saying is accurate in the sense that the legal justification and the legal basis for Roe versus Wade is the same basis for that ruling. So, yeah, so he's a little bit misrepresenting what Thomas actually wrote, but what he's saying, Thomas implied what he's saying.
Not surprising, because you have a U.S. Senator from Indiana who said the same thing. They're coming after you next. Period. Full stop. This is not just about women. This is not just about choice. This is not just about reproductive freedom. They're coming after you next.
So what he's saying is, America is coming after you. You're not safe here. California is not safe in the United States because of what's happening again, would you like to run my podcast for me, Governor? This is what we've been saying for years now, that all these different rights that we think of and the values we have here are not safe staying in America.
It's a serious moment in American history. This great divergence now.
Great divergence. So he's talking about the big sort. That's just what I was talking about earlier, the big sort. Great divergence is the words that he used.
Red states versus blue states. But in the spirit that I think defines the sentiment of many of us, and certainly the sentiment of those that spoke, we are many parts but one body. And when one part suffers, we all suffer. And so our empathy.
Yeah, look at they don't quite believe it, the couple of people, his wife and I think that's the attorney general behind him. They kind of put their head down like, I don't know about that.
Needs to be matched with our care and compassion and action to help support those Americans that are under real threat and autocracy, and I would argue tyranny, from those that wish to incarcerate them, to put them in jail, to put those family members that seek to help a young girl who was raped get their reproductive rights advanced outside that state, to civilly fine them or criminalize that action in the first place. Doctors themselves. That's what we're up against. Across the spectrum, banning books, banning what you can say in schools, even in corporate boards, taking tax breaks if they don't like what your position is.
Okay, I'm going to skip to a little different part here. So this is a part a few minutes later where he's talking again about the kind of direction that other parts of the country are taking. Let's listen.
Are you that Republicans will ban abortion nationwide, and would that undo everything that you and other Californians?
Very worried about it, and the only thing that's going to stop us is us.
So the question was, what happens if the rest of the country's, if the federal government bans abortion? And he says, well, that's up to us, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're one state. We can't control how the other 49 states vote or what their voters do. So
I'm very worried about it. If people don't wake up, we could be living in that reality. It's very real. This is not, it's anyone pay attention to what the hell's going on. I brought up Dirks for a reason, because we're having that conversation in this country about medieval England and what the world looked like in the 1700s. You can't make this up. I was joking with one of the members of the Supreme Court. I said, unfortunately, you're a lawyer. I wish you were a historian. Forget the law now. It's apparently your history versus my history. Some guy from the Hoover Institute's history versus someone from, Brookings Institute.
So what he's talking about here is this doctrine that many of the Supreme Court justices seem to have adopted, that if a right is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution, or if it's not, quote, deeply rooted in the history, then it's basically not protected. So what he's saying is the law has been turned into an exercise in history, and then if you do bad history, you can enact bad policies. And he's saying, well, maybe, why do we have the law at all? Why don't we just have historians judge what the law should be? Which is ridiculous.
And we're going to compare across our historic records. I mean, that was the one common theme between the decision yesterday and the decision today. It should alarm every single damn one of you. Go back to the world in 1790, the founding era. I mean, seriously, think about that. But that's what they're pursuing. That's what's all been about. Look at all the...
So again, what I say, their goal is to roll back the 20th century, to go back 150 years. So he's saying now, go back to the 1790s. What was the intent of the people who wrote the Constitution in the 1780s? What was the intent of the people who wrote the amendments during Reconstruction? Just what we've been saying here.
All the 54 judges, appellate court judges, 54 that Donald Trump endorsed. So many that were simply unqualified, except for the fact they all went through the same indoctrination chambers. They were approved, bought and paid for by the same groups, and they're writing the same opinions. Look at that Nelson decision as it relates to the assault weapons ban, and look at the decision yesterday that came out that's directly attaching an historical frame. This is what they've been about. It's the echo chamber. So the only thing to stop that, to stop specifically your question, to stop a Congress from doing just that is you and me, not just here in California, but all across this country. So it's, I don't know if you needed a wake-up call, but this sure as hell should be the ultimate.
I don't know if you needed a wake-up call, but this should be. Okay. Last thing I wanted to get to, this ad that Newsom ran in Florida, kind of trolling the governor over there. So let's take a look at that.
It's Independence Day, so let's talk about what's going on in America. Freedom, it's under attack in your state. Your Republican leaders, they're banning books, making it harder to vote, restricting speech in classrooms, even criminalizing women and doctors. I urge all of you living in Florida to join the fight, or join us in California, where we still believe in freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom to choose, freedom from hate, and the freedom to love. Don't let them take your freedom.
Paid for by Newsom for California Governor 2022.
Okay, so obviously there's some serious trolling going on there, but a couple things to point out. I don't know how seriously Newsom is looking into presidential run. I think this is like his first, just kind of feeling out the reaction. I think it's also, it's efficient use of money that's got a lot of media play. And so I think he spent $100,000 on it. It got replayed over on cable and social media and everything. So it got played well outside of Florida. But again, to point out, he's saying in this ad a lot of the things that he said at the press conference, that what's happening in Florida is directly opposed to our values, directly opposed to what we think is true. And he invited people to come back to California or to come to California, which ties into what I was saying earlier. There are people who, with the Bo video, people feel unsafe in various parts of the country. They're thinking of relocating. So he's actually reaching out and saying, yeah, I'm aware there are millions of people who might feel vulnerable and unsafe and threatened. And so in a sense, he's saying we're not just a sanctuary for abortion or reproductive rights. We're not just a sanctuary for immigrants and all these kind of things. We're kind of a sanctuary for America in general. So if you're just an American who just feels threatened, just feels like your rights are being infringed on, we're a sanctuary. We're just a general sanctuary. If you share our values and you want to come back here, or you want to come here. So very interesting, the video that the first video I showed you, talking about that, and it kind of ties into this ad that he ran in Florida. So anyway, that's just a few things I wanted to talk about today. There's a bunch of other stuff that I could talk about now, but I think this is enough for right now. So yeah, I will talk to you later.